Good morning and welcome. My name is BufordEdwards, and today I'm going to be briefly discussing navigating the use of technology with regard to client communication. As you can see, today we're going to be specifically discussing different types of communication with clients, covering face-to-face communication, telephone communication, video chat and meeting software, email communication, text messaging, AI chatbots, and social media pages. And while that seems like quite a bit, we're mainly going to be focused on specific criteria to consider when utilizing these forms of communication with regard to security and privacy issues. So with that said, let's get into it. So to start out, just a little bit about me. Again, my name is Buford Edwards, and currently I'm an assistant professor of social work and field coordinator for the University of Pikeville's MSW program, which is an online program. I am also a DSW candidate with the University of Kentucky, slated to graduate in May of 2024. Prior to coming to work at UPike, I was the Assistant Director of Online Learning with Eastern Kentucky University's Training and Resource Center, where I managed a team of course developers and a learning management system of over 30,000 active user accounts. As part of my job, I worked closely with the TRC and EKU IT and security departments to develop and maintain security over 3 web servers that house data for users. So I do have some experience with data security and privacy issues. Some of the running themes that we will look at today to watch out for are things like encryption, who owns your data, how is it housed, who has access to it, how can it be deleted, and who does this information apply to? And to answer that question, it applies to everyone, and it's important to look at these issues now as technology is advancing at a record pace, and we'll see things moving from face-to-face to online more and more quickly as time passes. So the first type of communication we will want to discuss is face-to-face communication. Obviously, that's the most secure type as it takes place between two parties. However, there are some security issues that also need to be addressed. The first of these is, where is this taking place? Are you in an office or a public place like a conference room? Is it a private office or a cubicle? Even though we consider this a private and confidential interaction, we need to assess who can hear what's being said and how do we minimize that. Which is going to be very different for every type of office and setting. I cannot give you advice other than being aware of your surroundings and taking steps to maintain and make this interaction as confidential and private as possible. Secondly, how are you documenting this interaction? Are you taking handwritten notes, writing on an iPad or a tablet, or recording the interaction? All are fine, but how is this data being stored? Are notes entered online and then shredded or stored in a locked cabinet? If you're taking electronic notes, where are they stored and who can possibly have access? If you're audio or videotaping, how are these being stored? Finally, how is data disposed of when it's no longer needed? Do you have a shredder? How are tapes and digital recordings destroyed? Do you have a data retention plan and policy in place? All these questions are very important to be asking even when dealing with face-to-face communication styles. And moving one step up from face-to-face communication is telephone communication, which we want to think of as pretty benign and be handled the same way as face-to-face. But as technology advances, there are different types of telephone communication. First, we have traditional landlines, which most offices still have, but many are moving to different voice over internet protocol or VoIP solutions, such as Google Voice, Microsoft Teams, Facebook Messenger, Zoom, or a custom VoIP solution through their internet service provider, or ISP for short. These VoIP options transform the caller and callee's voices to digital signals that send packets of data over the internet that will then be converted back to an analog voice signal on the other end. The key concern here is data security and encryption as it's being transmitted over the open internet. While not exactly like VoIP, cell phone communication operates very similar to VoIP, sending digital signals over the air via radio signals that are also transmitted through fiber optic internet from tower to tower. So the same security concerns remain. Before entering into any of these types of digital communication forms, the company needs to research the provider's policies and procedures with regard to the big four. Number 1, data encryption. Number 2, data access. Number 3, data storage. And number 4, data retention and destruction. At a minimum, the company should offer end-to-end encryption with zero access and retention of recordings by the provider's staff. If the data is retained and then stored, it should be encrypted and kept strictly confidential, and the provider should have a clear policy on how users can access their data and ensure that their data is deleted upon request. Again, just like face-to-face communication, with telephone communication, there should be several considerations made, such as where is the interaction taking place, how is it being documented, how is it being stored, how is it retained and destroyed. Moving on to video chat software, we see that many of the same companies that offer VoIP services also offer video chat services, which makes sense since it's all transmitted over the internet. Some of the more common and most used are Zoom, which if you recall during COVID came under fire for its lack of security and privacy, which after a great deal of negative media exposure was fixed. The main issue with Zoom was likely due to the company not being ready for the influx of its use when COVID started. Zoom is still not perfect, and users should explore all of the security settings and enable as many as possible for the most secure experience. Very similar to Zoom is Microsoft Teams, which assumed Skype some years ago and moved to a more business-focused model. While Teams is business-focused, its level of security is comparable to Zoom. Some services that claim end-to-end encryption but are questionable at best due to a lack of transparency in their privacy policies are Google Meet, Apple FaceTime, and Facebook Messenger. These all claim to be secure, but they offer very limited information on their actual privacy, citing security reasons. For this, I would recommend not using them for confidential conversations. The last two on this list are Big Blue Button and Jitsi Meet. Big Blue Button is used in several educational institutions and can be self-hosted on a company's own web server or hosted by a Big Blue Button provider. While Big Blue Button is encrypted and secure for the sake of maintaining privacy, if the company has their own web server, I would recommend self-hosting as it ensures you have 100% control over the data. However, many companies that do have their own servers typically rent virtual servers, and virtual servers are secure, but there's always a chance that the company you're renting from can access your data. So again, I would suggest researching very carefully the big four: number one, data encryption; number two, data access; number three, data storage; and number four, data retention and destruction policies of the service provider. Less known is a service that offers all the functionality of Zoom but enhanced security and privacy. It's Jitsi Meet. Jitsi is typically a self-hosted service on the company's own web servers. However, the same considerations need to be made as with Big Blue Button. Both Big Blue Button and Jitsi Meet are free and open source, meaning that their code base is open for all to see, to analyze, and to fix. And I would recommend either of these services over Zoom, but the company would have to have the IT infrastructure to manage them appropriately. Finally, we see the same considerations that need to be made regarding encryption, access, storage, and destruction across the board here. Moving along to the most used and least secure of all communication types is email. Email is the oldest form of electronic communication and has improved over the years, but remains the least secure. Some of the worst offenders are Yahoo Mail, Apple Mail or iCloud Mail, and Gmail. Outlook would be right up there as well. Providers that offer more security are newer providers like Proton Mail and Zoho. However, due to incentives and kickbacks, most companies will still use Gmail and Outlook. I would suggest sending no more than the bare necessary information via email, and again, take into consideration and do your homework on the big four: data encryption, data access, data storage, and data retention and destruction. And as we move more and more into the digital age, we're finding that text messaging is quickly becoming the preferred method of communication, with over 23 billion messages sent a day according to Forbes. The largest provider are Apple's iMessage, Android Messages, or Google Messages, depending on your Android device, Messenger, and WhatsApp, which are both owned by Meta, or Facebook's parent company, and then Microsoft Teams. WhatsApp claims to be very secure, offering end-to-end encryption, and is the most used messaging app, particularly in Europe. Lesser used apps are like Signal and Telegram, who claim to be the most secure, and then there's a less secure and not to be used, such as GroupMe and Discord. GroupMe is intended for just simple group communication, and Discord is intended for gamers to communicate with one another while streaming their gaming sessions, so it's not to be used for this type of communication. Again though, do your homework and consider the big four when text messaging. The next service to consider that I want to briefly mention are AI chatbots. Chatbots are not intended for communication, but rather as an FAQ type service and to really weed out simple issues that can possibly be solved without human intervention. They are not intended for things like therapy services and should not be relied on. They are not secure and are only as good as their programming. The information given to chatbots are not secure and is not encrypted in any way. Most are actually on the open-facing websites of the company that they represent. An emerging and dangerous trend is the development and use of social media pages for communication. Popular sites such as Facebook, Instagram, X, or what's formerly known as Twitter, Snapchat, LinkedIn, and even TikTok are beginning to emerge for people to post questions, ask advice, and even answer questions. In short, this should be avoided at all costs. There is zero privacy on these sites, and even though some may tout it, it's not true. Do not, I repeat, do not use social media for any form of confidential communication in any way. Finally, to wrap things up, when communicating with clients, regardless of the method, privacy and security are the main concerns. We owe this to our clients, and if we can remember the big four: data encryption, data access, data storage, and data retention and destruction, we will be able to go a long way to ensuring this. For more information, you can visit the sites listed here. Thank you and have a great day.